This is Zahi Karam, and Zahi is the director of data science for Bluecore. We're going to chat a little bit because when I started at Bluecore a couple of years ago, on my first day, I met Zahi and I said to myself, you know, I've pretended for several years that I have any idea what data science is. Perhaps I have an actual data scientist here. I'm going to ask him, I'm going to sit him in a room for an hour and talk to him about, well, what is data science? And then I thought for today, hey, that conversation was really enlightening. Maybe other people have also been pretending to know what data science is. And what if we sat down with a data scientist? So the next 20 minutes or so is, hey, Zahi, tell me about data science. And so as when I approached you about this session and I said, hey, you know, I remember this conversation from a couple of years ago, and I asked you what data science is, and I said to Zahi, and I remember you told me blah, 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 and Zahi said, I didn't say that. So let's start with, so whatever I thought it was for the past 2 years was incorrect. Zahi, what's data science?
Hi. Data science is essentially what keeps me in business. It's taking data and learning from it, whether gathering insights, whether making predictions, or whether taking action. That's really what data science is. I don't know if you wanted more.
That's good. So lunch is outside. Yeah. So data analysts do that same thing too, right? Like, so I have, there are data analysts I just mentioned, and I'm now mentioning again. So they do work that sounds like that. Why aren't they data scientists?
I think they very much are data scientists in that definition of data science. I think data science is one of these words that is very confounded with things like machine learning and artificial intelligence and data analysis and BI, and it's a bit of a mess out there. And I think if you look up the word data scientist, you could put data analysts under it, you could put machine learning people under it. It's what's been very hard for us when we're trying to hire for different roles to be able to even know when somebody says data science on the resume, what is it that they do? And I think maybe I can dive a little bit more into this by saying, I think the biggest confusion out there is AI, machine learning, and data science. Those are, I think, the three biggest things that are confused. And for example, I think Max made a mistake and said machine learning when he should have said AI. So there you go. so I'll clarify.
Sharon has a list of corrections in the app that she's keeping, so you can check the app for all the things we've said incorrectly.
So an example of that is data science uses data and gets insights from it. Machine learning makes predictions on that data, and AI takes action on that data. So let's say you work at a certain startup that works with marketers, and your VP of product, who's extremely ambitious, says, hey, you know, we should find a way to automatically frequency cap emails. And you're like, shit, how am I going to do that? That model that takes that data and takes an action, and the action is, do I send an email or not send an email? That's an AI model. So our predictive prioritization is our first AI model, which we're very excited about. But to build that model, I need to understand whether if I send an email to that person, are they going to unsubscribe or not, right? Because I need to use that information. So now I need to build a model that predicts whether somebody's going to unsubscribe or not. That's a machine learning problem. That's making a prediction from the data. And let's say I was building the machine learning model, the predict whether somebody's going to unsubscribe or not. And while doing testing, I realized that, hey, there's seems to be a different regime for different types of emails. And it turns out that triggered emails, people don't unsubscribe as much from, whereas more sort of the daily batch, people tend to unsubscribe more. So that insight that I need to encode the type of email into my model, that's data science, right? And data analysis is really taking all of that, all these learnings, and distilling them and sharing them and essentially presenting them in a way that you can take action on. And that's, I think, that's how I think of it. I hope that was somewhat useful.
Let me ask, this is how the first conversation went, I'm remembering this now. So let me ask, does it actually matter, if I'm not a data scientist and I'm a marketer type person, whether it's AI or machine learning, does it actually matter? Like, does that impact my life?
It's
Because actually, until you just said it, I thought we had AI models with the category affinity and all that stuff that we've rolled out.
Those were machine learning models. Yeah, I've been trying to correct this for a while. But this is why I'm super excited about our first AI model. So we can finally say AI. Yeah. But the only way it matters, I think, and this is something you should really ask whenever somebody says, hey, I'm going to sell you data science. I'm going to sell you data science or machine learning or AI. If you can't use it to take action, then you're wasting your time. That's the only thing you should care about as a marketer. Can I take action on whether the insights, whether it's the analyses, whether it's the predictions, or, I mean, AI hopefully is already taking the action for you. You don't have to do anything. But if you can't action on these outputs of the models, then you're really just spending money to pontificate in a meeting and be like, oh, yeah, we saw this trend. Doesn't matter.
Is that a function of the model? That, OK, so there's some sort of output? Or is that you're saying, like, I don't mean to plug us, but you're saying, no, the software should do both? And why does that matter? What if you did get an output? Couldn't you just execute that someplace?
I mean, if you get an output and it's a useful output, and then you need to put a lot of legwork to action on it, whether that's taking the output, which is maybe a CSV file that somebody shares with you, and then you have to take it and you have to put it into somewhere where you segment based on that, and then maybe combine it with some other data. Yeah, you can, certainly you've actioned on that data, but how much effort did it take you to do that? And then the next time around, you're like, do I really want to do that again? And am I going to do that every day or every week or however often that happens? So I think that really the value of anything with data is, can you action on it or not? And how much effort it takes, because in the end you have, I don't know, that was very stressful watching the marketer's journey this morning.
Joyce.
Yeah, Joyce's journey, yeah. So I hope it's not that bad. But yeah, like if it takes that much time, then do you have time to do the other things? Do you have time to think about the creative, to think about the strategy, all that fun stuff?
All right, so let's back up to when you were getting your degree. Why do I feel like I'm just hearing about data science like in the past, I don't know, I wrote down 8 years, but maybe 5 years, whatever. Like, where was it? What was happening before that? People were getting PhDs and stuff.
Yeah, so I think that some people, yeah.
Other people, yeah. In my case.
So the tricky thing here is that, I mean, machine learning, data science have been around for a while. I think when we really started calling things data science and machine learning was in the 60s, when sort of computers could help us make action on data rather than more sort of scientific experiments. So I think that, so it's been around for a while. You guys have probably interacted with it in automated phone systems where you say, I want to go there, and they're like, I don't know what you mean, and then you keep repeating the same thing, and then operator, operator, operator. So it's been around. That's my old life also. So, but essentially, it's becoming much more relevant in marketing because of all the data that you guys have, which is I can't cuss on stage. It's frigging exciting. So it's all the data that you as marketers have access to now, and so that's why I think, and the compute power that we have thanks to Google, Amazon, and all those, where we can actually crunch through all these numbers and provide whether segmentation, but more excitingly, one-to-one personalization.
All right, so there's we're sort of at a point. I mean, part of why we exist too, right? I mean, or startups like us exist, that computing power has gotten cheaper and more powerful. We have a data set that would benefit from machine learning or AI, and marketers are now more increasingly willing to rely on some sort of intelligent system to help with execution. Does that sound like?
That sounds about right.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, it took me 2 years to get to that. But what is it? about this, our data set in terms of marketing, what's interesting about that? Like, why is this an interesting problem? Because with a data scientist background, you can apply that to all sorts of things. What's interesting about this?
So if you had asked me that maybe 3.5 years ago when I joined Bluecore first, I would have said, it's an interesting data set. There's a lot of data in there. I'm sure there's something fun in there. And that's what I said back then. But now, what I've learned and what keeps me here for 3.5 years, and hopefully longer than that, is that every time we try and ask a new question of the data, whether it's for an insight, a model, or a predictive model, or an AI model, every time we ask a question, it sends us through a completely different part of the machine learning, AI, data science literature. And for myself, that's what's exciting. So for example, when we were doing predictive models for customer lifetime value, that sent us to the Bayesian world, Bayes rule, and all that fun stuff, right?
What does that mean?
Oh, God.
One sentence that I would understand.
It's essentially using prior information about general distributions to sort of inform your model when you're making decisions. So our predictive customer lifetime value model is essentially trying to make individual decisions on individual customers, but it's also understanding your whole population base as a prior to make those decisions. I don't think you wanted to ask me that. That was like
Thank you.
That was a bad answer, I think. The other one was, and then we get into a world where you're doing deep learning and all that fun stuff when you're trying to think about whether somebody's going to convert or not, right? Because you've got sequence data and now you're trying to make a decision there. So that's exciting. And then you've got your prediction modeling world where essentially you're doing matrix factorization, some nasty stuff there. And now we're in this AI world where we had to learn this whole new field. Well, it's new to us relatively, the reinforcement learning literature. So I've been here 3.5 years and I've learned more than, embarrassed to say, 5 years too long doing my PhD, right? Because it was so narrow. It would take you so long to get a first set of results, where over here, we're essentially working with so much data across so many different fields, and we get results, and we know whether we're doing good or not, right? And it's really, do these emails perform? That's how we know.
So let me make you slightly uncomfortable, like I am every time I talk to you, and say, like, let's put on your marketing hat.
Yes.
And you're now, for some reason, the VP of marketing or e-commerce at one of our clients,
Yeah.
and you don't have a data science anything, like a team or anything. Can you introduce that? Can you cold start data science in a company? Do you need to work your way to it? I was at a conference, and as McKinsey might say, a large Boston-based home goods retailer, online only, was talking about how they have 200 data scientists. Like, I don't understand I almost understand how you get to 200 before I understand how you get to 1. So how would you start? Like, what would you do?
I think it's such a mess. I think you would start with what Mahmoud did, which was convince some idiot fresh out of academia person that, hey, we have interesting data, do you want to come figure it out? And then for the first maybe 6 months, what my job here was essentially data analyst, Excel expert, even though I didn't know how to use Excel, I'm embarrassed to say. And then literally anything where there were numbers, can you figure this out? So that was my, yeah. So, and then answering essentially your questions, like, hey, tell me about my data. Like, as a marketer, I'm Sephora, help me figure out what I can do with this, right? And to get from there to data science is really to say, to be able to build your first predictive model, right, is really to say, how can I essentially find a way to get this team focused on one mission, right? And this was a combination of several things we did. One of them was essentially build out a data analysis team that allowed us to have a dedicated team answering questions about data for our partners, which is extremely important because you guys have questions and we want to answer them. 2, also having a vision for what it is that we need to build. Because a lot of times you get a data scientist, like somebody gives you a data scientist and you're like, here's the data, figure it out. yeah, we'll find interesting things, but you're not going to be able to action on them. It's fun. It was fun. It was fun for me, but you can't action on it. So essentially, it was a confluence of these two. One of them is having a dedicated team, essentially doing these analyses for our partners, and the other one was saying, all right, what are the products we want to build? And that was a lot of market research by our product team, and we said, okay, this predictive suite that we released, it's been a while now, was sort of what we needed to build. And then it's just a matter of finding talent, and that's the tricky part. That's really the tricky part. Hiring data scientists.
So what do you look for? Because I know you have like a physicist on your team, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is. So you have like, the people who you have on your team are pretty their backgrounds are varied, and it's not like retail data scientists. Like that's not a thing, or what they didn't go to school for that thing, and they went to school for something else. How do you hire someone if you're like, oh yeah, I need a mathematician or whatever Sophia is, and then you need like a physicist or whatever like how do you hire someone?
So I have there's
they weren't like the manager of PhD scientist and then like a director, because those people I can hire. Like what are you asking them?
So when I set out to hire the first sort of person to join the team, I think I'm pretty decent at the math part. I hope by now. I wanted to hire somebody that was even stronger than that, right? Because I feel like there's a wide spectrum in what defines a data scientist. There's everything from an engineer that played around with data so much and learned these models and then became a data scientist, and then there's sort of this hardcore mathematician that then learned how to code and then became a data scientist, right? And I wanted to skew towards the hardcore math side. And my reasoning for that was, first, I want to make sure there are people that do math better than I do. And the other thing is I wanted to make sure that, because we have an extremely strong engineering team. That was clear to me from even before I joined, right? So we have people that can mentor people to become better engineers, better developers. But to teach somebody math when they're in their 20s or their 30s, no, that's not possible. Or very hard. So I wanted to make sure that people had the foundation so that when we threw a paper at them or when we threw a problem like do frequency capping and, hey, it's somewhere in the reinforcement learning literature, they could digest that literature and distill it down to something that says, not only can I use some model that Google open sourced, right, because there's a lot of those out there, but that only gets me maybe 50% of the way. That last 50% is where you need to understand fundamentally what's happening under the hood so you can progress and actually deliver something that works.
So would you start then if you were a marketer where this role and really this way of thinking about the business didn't exist, would you hire like an insight, like a data analyst, and sort of give them some leeway in the first 6 months like you did to get up to speed? To figure out, hey, where can I make an impact here that doesn't, because there's us, there's companies in our general world who offer products that are they're trying to accomplish something similar. There's syndicated ways of doing this, but there's value in having someone on your team. How do you hire someone to say, okay, the value of having you here is understanding my business and applying these principles to it, because you can go hire us to do some things. How do you hire that person?
Yeah, I think if you're starting off, I would not start with somebody that's going to build that predictive model. I would start with somebody that can understand your data. Because if you don't understand the data you have, then how can you know what you can do with it? The other thing is, before you hire your first data scientist, you should know what you want to build, Mahmoud, because to me that's very important. When I think about startups that even before they've started collecting data, they go and hire 3 PhDs and they're like, okay, we're going to be a data-driven startup. That to me is a waste of time. What you really need to start collecting the data, find ways to action on that data that might be heuristic, right? Example, triggered emails. That's a heuristic. Somebody abandoned the cart, you send an email. So we actually kind of did it the right way, which was we had a strong engineering team that made it very easy to get data into our system and action on it and provide value. And then eventually, once you sort of have that data set and you have a visionary product team that says, hey, these are the additional things we can do with this data, this is, I think, when you need to hire a data science. So I think maybe I was hired maybe 6 months earlier than was good, but I think it worked out.
But you were willing to take on some of this other stuff, because it is, if you look at my background, which is barely being able to stand upright and speak English, and your background, somehow you transitioned your team to me. And like I was able to have, so I came at it from a marketing standpoint, right? So I inherited folks that you had onto the data insights team. Like you guys kind of graduated into data science, the insights team came over to my team, and we approached it from a marketing strategy side of things.
Yes.
And so can you find data scientists who can think about that to say, okay, I can think holistically, both from a marketing challenge and strategy standpoint, and that team may be broken off separately, and then there's going to be the harder technical piece. Like, is that a person, or are you better off hiring like a really smart analyst who understands retail and said, hey, you know what, make a list of 100 questions you want answered, and then we'll narrow it down and start trying to figure them out?
I don't know which one's easier. I think it just, we as Bluecore stumbled into this where when I joined, my job was data analyst, and then eventually it became data scientist once we built up that capability. But it's really just finding somebody motivated enough to do whatever the hell you want them to do.
Yeah, so I not to take this over, but when I did inherit Lemma, and now we built the team out, I think the thing that was striking for me was I did kind of think it was like, hey, here's the data scientist, data analyst, like, tell me what it says. Like, but that's crazy. Like, you can't do that. But I feel like that was how I thought about it until I was there for a bit, and Lemma and Paul would come back and say, hey, I had this idea about what to look for. Mm-hmm. Like, they had sort of an insight, like, about the next best purchase. I'm curious, like, what would the next best purchase be, or the next best category, and approach it that way. Like, that's why I said it at 9 o'clock this morning. What's the question you want to answer? Yeah. And I think if you can hire people who can understand enough retail, just enough retail, to be able to think about what are the questions you'd want to answer, you can kind of let them go and give them 6 months to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think this is why I was, I mean, the team was great technically, and then by adding somebody like Ben, I don't know what Ben is, somebody like that who used to be a CSM on it at Bluecore, the combination of somebody like Ben, who understands the business and understands the pain points of the marketer pretty well, and then somebody strong technically like Paul, Lemma, and Christy, bringing those two together is really what helps you focus, and rather than just provide insights, provide actionable insights. If you look at our offering for essentially the, what do you call them? For the insights modules? Modules, yeah. So if you look at the offering of modules, they're all actionable. It's not just, hey, we'll tell you about your data. We'll tell you that you have a one-time buyer problem, and this is how you fix it, right? Even in our communication, in the emails that we send out that talk about one-time buyer problem, we're always trying to suggest action, right? And I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, so I think if I were to sort of sum up, because I think it was a journey for us to get there. I think you set it up nicely in that you do need someone who's highly analytical, but really interested in retail. Because Paul, who leads the analyst team, I think he couldn't do the work he does if he weren't really interested in the retail problems. I think having someone like Ben on my team who also is like a marketer, someone who wants to send the emails and set up campaigns, I think that's where I would start if I were to ever go to do this again, is to go back and say, okay, data science is like a red herring, right? We talk about it, and I think people throw it around because it seems impressive, because you need to raise VC money to afford these people. So that's like a red herring, that the benefit is, hey, if you get a super smart analyst who's interested in retail and match them up with someone who knows how to think about campaigns, they will get you really, really far. And then you can worry about, hey, to really push this, do I need to bring in someone who can create machine learning models?
I'll say one last thing. You're very right, but I think that maybe the most important step is, so let's say we got all of this. How easily can we push it out?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think the good news, and I think I missed this back when I was on the other side, is that this is totally doable. This isn't a cultural thing. You don't really, beyond hiring these two people, you don't have to convince somebody that data is super important. They're going to come up, the focus is from what are business questions we have. Data is a means of solving that, but they're about business questions. Everyone has business questions. I think that part is exciting because, yes, we all have these arguments about, can I do this campaign? Is it on brand? Is it this? Like, that's all well and good, but everyone has questions and they can be solved with this, and someday data science may be helpful to you. But that is sort of where we come in, so that part, there are syndicated models that we can provide to help answer some of those questions, but foundationally, I think there's nothing stopping anyone here from hiring these two roles.
Yeah, I think there's syndicated models, there's custom models and custom things that we can help with. I think we're almost running out of time, but I do want to say, I do want to make a little bit of a plug here. The plug is, I'm friggin' excited about the data you guys have. I'm excited to action on it. And if you want to experience that excitement firsthand, find me somewhere later on, and I will tell you about why it's all cool and why I'm very happy 3.5 years later that I am in the marketing space. When, if you had asked me when I first joined Bluecore, I would have told you, hey, it's a paycheck, it's New York, yay, let's do this.
But those things too.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks, Zahi. This is great. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right.